This'll put things into perspective for you. Ricky Gervais is one of the most hated people in Hollywood, and that's exactly why I love him. The man doesn't hold back, and his humor doesn't cater to fragile egos, and that drives the woke mob nuts. It's not that they don't get the jokes, it's that they can't stand the punchline. You definitely want to stick around to the end because I'll share with you a joke where he shreds them to pieces, but before I go on with the video, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more discussions like this.
People get offended when they mistake the subject of a joke with the actual target.
Yeah.
And they're not necessarily the same thing. You can make jokes about any subject. It depends what the joke is.
Yeah.
There's no rules. You can't joke about this. You can.
You should be able to.
You just can.
Yeah.
Okay? And there's nothing sacred.
Well, that's
really.
the point. There's nothing sacred. So
Yeah.
everything should be subject to ridicule.
Yeah.
I mean, even just to force you to understand, think about it more.
I know. But people then they go, wow, yeah, but you shouldn't hurt people's feelings. Well, you can if their feelings are wrong.
Yeah.
You know, if you don't like the facts, don't change the facts, change the feelings.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And also they try and do this thing. Oh, you should never punch down. You should punch up. Well, who's to say what's up and down is?
Yeah, it's a subjective.
So you're deciding who's down and who's up. No. You don't get to do that.
Yeah, no, and so there's this whole thing nowadays about not offending people and people feeling uncomfortable.
That is spot on. Offense is so subjective, and what offends one person might not even register with someone else. And in comedy, it's even trickier because everyone's got different thresholds for what's funny versus what's too far. That's why this whole idea of punching up versus punching down in comedy can get messy. The lines get blurry very fast, so let's test this with a scenario of ours. If a comedian makes a joke about a politician, are they punching up? What if they joke about a politician who happens to belong to a minority group? Does that suddenly make the joke punching down even if the person being joked about holds enormous power and influence? Besides, who gets to decide which groups are down? The woke mob on X? The loudest voices on the room? The truth is, the moment you start assigning groups of people who can't be joked about, you lose the raw and honest power of comedy.
But it really is that case of people come up and they say, oh, I was offended by that joke. And, my first reaction is, I don't care. Mm-hmm. Like, that doesn't mean anything. You're telling me how you feel. What I want to say why. And I'll explain to them. I'm willing to explain to them why the joke isn't offensive. I'm not one of the people that think, I'm going to say what I want, I'm going to be as offensive and then go f*** the joke. I'm willing to explain why it's not offensive. That often offence comes when people mistake the subject of a joke with the actual target, and they're not necessarily the same, particularly if you deal in taboo subjects, which I do, because I want to go there, because I want to take the audience by the hand and take them through a scary forest. Do you know what I mean? I like the discomfort of expressing and talking about really uncomfortable things, because that's what most people worry about. If you're in a safe world where your firstborn isn't dying of dysentery and you're not being shot at, the worst thing that happens is something embarrassing happens to you, or you say a stupid thing or bad service. So that's why I deal with those things, because everyone understands it.
Some topics are just bound to be offensive or cross the line to certain people, whether it's politics, religion, race, or anything personal. There are subjects that are by their very nature supposed to hit a nerve, and that's to be expected. These topics tie into people's identities, histories, or traumas, but here's the problem. If we tiptoe around them and avoid talking about them altogether, we create an elephant in the room situation. Everyone knows the topic is there, looming over our heads, but nobody wants to address it, and when we do that, things tend to get even more problematic. Jordan Peterson describes it best when he says, in order to be able to think, you have to risk being offensive. By the way, I've noticed you still haven't liked and subscribed to the channel, so what are you waiting for? The thing is, addressing controversial or offensive topics isn't about discussing it for the sake of it. It's about progress, and by discussing these difficult subjects openly, we give ourselves a chance to challenge assumptions, shift perspective, and find common ground. Yeah, it might offend some people along the way, but that's part of the process. Growth isn't always comfortable, and neither is freedom of expression. But if we silence ourselves or others because we're afraid of causing offense, then we lose out on the possibility of better understanding each other and the world around us. Ricky talks more about an interaction with a fan, and as you guessed, it goes horribly wrong.
Try and explain to someone every day what freedom of speech means, particularly in the context of comedy, and particularly in the context of a joke, that a joke about a bad thing isn't as bad as the bad thing. It's not even necessarily condoning the bad thing. It could be anti the bad thing. It depends on the actual joke. And this woman said, you should never make jokes about food allergies. I should have left it, right? I sent back, I make jokes about AIDS, cancer, famine, and the Holocaust, right? And you're telling me I should never joke about food allergies? She sent back, yes, but the Holocaust didn't kill children. Well, it did, didn't it? It was horrible, the Holocaust. Some would say as bad as food allergies.
The funny thing is that he actually tweeted that in 2016, and it perfectly summed up the state of the woke culture today. This mob is more concerned with jumping on the bandwagon of outrage than actually understanding the issue. They're mad about, and that's like a race to be the loudest voice in the room. Regardless of whether there's any real knowledge or thought behind it, they'll latch onto a headline, a soundbite, or a viral post, and before you know it, there's a wave of anger and suddenly everyone has an opinion about really dividing into facts or nuances. It's outrage for the sake of outrage, driven by a need to fit in with the group rather than genuinely caring about the cause. The problem here is that this kind of reactionary outrage is always surface level. It's not about having a deep conversation of the topic or a meaningful conversation. It's about finding the next thing to be mad about. The actual issues get lost in a sea of hashtags and retweets. The goal isn't to learn or grow, it's to be the most outraged, to show off how woke they are to the world. It's performative activism at its finest, where it's less about making a difference and more about making noise, and sadly this kind of behavior only serves to further polarize society, driving everyone apart. And to solve the issue of offending people, some comedians have walked over their materials so much that a new wave has emerged called woke comedy. Watch Ricky's reaction next.
There's a new type of comedy at the moment called woke comedy, right? No, it's very progressive, you know. There are some clubs now where the comedian has to sign a thing saying he won't say anything contentious or he won't say anything that could offend anyone. It's a safe space for the audience. Woke comedy. And I tried to watch a bit of it, and I decided I'd rather watch Louis C.K. masturbate. Can't mention him anymore. He's cancelled.
Let me give you my 2 cents on this. Comedy is one of the most subjective forms of art, and what makes one person laugh might leave another completely unfazed. Some people love dark humor, others enjoy slapstick, and some prefer witty banter. But no matter where you fall on that spectrum, one thing has become glaringly obvious. Woke comedy is often the worst kind of comedy. It's not because it's political or socially aware, it's because the entire shtick is based on preaching and trying to establish one's moral superiority. This genre tries to serve an agenda first and entertain second, and you can see in the way the jokes are structured. Instead of punchlines that land with impact, they give you moral lectures disguised as jokes, and let's be honest, no one came to a comedy show for a TED Talk. It's almost as if there's a checklist of approved topics they have to run through. The humor ends up being so predictable that you can see the punchline coming from a mile away. Joe Rogan commented on the exact topic saying, you know when you start believing things that you inherently know are not true, but you say them and repeat them because the cult wants you to do it. This is something that you can exploit in stand-up comedy, and that's what a stand-up comedy is all about. It's all about that. That's why he launched his own comedy club, which features comedians that are canceled elsewhere. But what are your thoughts on this? Do you think Ricky is spot on with his commentary? Let's get the conversation rolling in the comments down below.